and study official history. In 1792 the French Revolution sparked a European conflict that would last a generation, a struggle for mastery of Europe and the world, a contest fought on land and sea. In this war of shifting alliances the most enduring rivalry was between France and Britain. Britain could not challenge France on land, but at sea it was a different matter. Britain's Royal Navy, as dominant on the waves as Napoleon, was to prove on land. And in an age when Britain had many skilled naval commanders, one stood out above the rest: Horatio Nelson. Bold, inspiring and brilliant for the British, he'd become a national hero and legend. These are the stories of his greatest battles.
The Battle of Trafalgar was a naval engagement that took place on the 21st of October 1805 between the British Royal Navy and the combined fleets of the French and Spanish navies during the War of the Third Coalition, August-December 1805, of the Napoleonic Wars 1803 to 1815. Belligerents: United Kingdom, France, Spain. Commanders and leaders: Horatio Nelson, Cuthbert Collingwood. First French Empire: Pierre Villeneuve and Federico Gravina. Strength: 27 ships of the line, 4 frigates, 1 schooner, 1 cutter, 2,148 guns, 17,000 men, 33 ships of the line, 5 frigates, 2 brigs, 2,632 weapons, 30,000 men. As part of Napoleon's plans to invade the United Kingdom, the French and Spanish fleets combined to take control of the English Channel and provide the Grande Armée safe passage. The Allied fleet, under the command of the French Admiral, Pierre-Charles Villeneuve, sailed from the port of Cádiz in the south of Spain on the 18th of October 1805. They encountered the British fleet under Lord Nelson, recently assembled to meet this threat, in the Atlantic Ocean, along the southwest coast of Spain, off Cape Trafalgar. Nelson was outnumbered, with 27 British ships of the line to 33 Allied ships, including the largest warship in either fleet, the Spanish Santissima Trinidad. To address this imbalance, Nelson sailed his fleet directly at the Allied battle line's flank, hoping to break the line into pieces. Villeneuve had worried that Nelson might attempt this tactic, but for various reasons, failed to prepare for it. The plan worked almost perfectly. Nelson's columns split the Franco-Spanish fleet in 3, isolating the rear half from Villeneuve's flag aboard Bucentaur. The Allied vanguard sailed off, while it attempted to turn around, giving the British temporary superiority over the remainder of their fleet. In the ensuing fierce battle, 20 Allied ships were lost, while the British lost none. The offensive exposed the leading British ships to intense crossfire as they approached the Franco-Spanish lines. Nelson's own HMS Victory led the front column, and was almost knocked out of action. Nelson was shot by a French musketeer during the battle, and died shortly before it ended. Villeneuve was captured, along with his flagship Bucentaur. He attended Nelson's funeral, while a captive on parole in Britain. The senior Spanish fleet officer, Admiral Federico Gravina, escaped with the surviving third of the Franco-Spanish fleet. He died 5 months later of wounds sustained during the battle. The victory confirmed British naval supremacy, and was achieved in part through Nelson's departure from prevailing naval tactical orthodoxy.
Pursuit of Villeneuve. Nelson's search in the Mediterranean. Early in 1805, Vice Admiral Lord Nelson commanded the British fleet blockading the Mediterranean port of Toulon. Unlike William Cornwallis, who maintained a close blockade off Brest with the Channel Fleet, Nelson adopted a loose blockade in hope of luring the French out to battle, saying, "To be able to get at the enemy, you must let them come out, if you cannot get at them." However, Villeneuve's fleet successfully evaded Nelson when the British were blown off station by storms. Nelson commenced a search of the Mediterranean supposing that the French intended to make for Egypt, but Villeneuve instead took his fleet through the Strait of Gibraltar, rendezvoused with the Spanish fleet in Cádiz, and sailed as planned for the Caribbean. Once Nelson realized that the French were crossing the Atlantic, he set off in pursuit. The chase to the West Indies, he missed them by just days in the West Indies as a result of false information. Cádiz having lured the British to the West Indies, Villeneuve returned from the Caribbean to Europe intending to break the blockade at Brest. Nelson, still in fear for Egypt, made to return to the Mediterranean. The fast-sailing corvette, taking word of his plans back to the Admiral, spotted the French heading further north. On receiving this intelligence, Lord Barr was alive to the enemy's strategy and immediately ordered Admiral Cornwallis to combine his squadron with that of Vice Admiral Calder off Ferrol and stretch out 30 to 40 leagues into the Atlantic to block the French retreat. Calder intercepted the French, resulting in inconclusive engagement during the Battle of Cape Trafalgar, in which 2 of the Spanish ships were captured. Villeneuve abandoned Napoleon and sailed back to Ferrol in northern Spain. There he received orders from Napoleon to return to Brest according to the main plan. Napoleon's invasion plans were depended on having a sufficiently large number of ships in the line protecting his whole alone in the English Channel. This would require Villeneuve's force of 33 ships to join Vice Admiral Villeneuve's 21 ships at Brest, along with a squadron of 5 ships under Captain Belligerents, which would have given him a combined force of 51 ships in the line. On August 15, Cornwallis decided to detach 20 ships of the line and part of the English Channel to sail southward to engage the enemy forces in Spain, leaving the Channel with only 11 ships of the line. The detached force formed the nucleus of the British fleet at Trafalgar. This fleet, under the command of Vice Admiral Calder, reached Cádiz on September 15th. Nelson joined the fleet on September 28th to take command. British. On October 21st, Admiral Nelson had 27 ships of the line with 2,148 cannons, and a total of 17,000 crewmen and marines under his command. Nelson's flagship, HMS Victory, captained by Thomas Masterman Hardy, was one of 3 100-gun first-rates in his fleet. He also had 4 98-gun second-rates and 20 third-rates. One of the third-rates was an 80-gun vessel, and 16 were 74-gun vessels. The remaining 3 were 64-gun ships, which were being phased out of the Royal Navy at the time of the battle. Nelson also had 4 frigates of 38 or 36 guns, a 12-gun schooner and a 10-gun cutter. Franco-Spanish. Against Nelson, Vice Admiral Villeneuve, sailing on his flagship Du Centaur, fielded 33 ships of the line, including some of the largest in the world at the time. The Spanish contributed 4 first-rates to the fleet, 3 of these ships, one at 130 guns, Santissima Trinidad, and 2 at 112 guns, Príncipe de Asturias, Santa Ana, were much larger than anything under Nelson's command. The 4th first-rate carried 100 guns. The fleet had 6 80-gun third-rates, 4 French and 2 Spanish, and 1 Spanish 64-gun third-rate. The remaining 22 third-rates were 74-gun vessels, of which 14 were French and 8 Spanish. In total, the Spanish contributed 15 ships of the line and the French 18, along with some 30,000 men and marines manning 2,632 cannons. The fleet also included 5 40-gun frigates and 2 18-gun brigs, all French. Nelson's plan. The prevailing tactical orthodoxy at the time involved maneuvering to approach the enemy fleet in a single line of battle and then engaging broadside in parallel lines. In previous times, fleets had usually engaged in a mixed melee of chaotic one-on-one battles. One reason for the development of the line of battle formation was to facilitate control of the fleet. If all the ships were in line, signaling during battle became possible. The line also allowed either side to disengage by breaking away in formation. If the opponent chose to continue, their line would be broken as well. 39. This often led to inconclusive battles, or allowed the losing side to minimize its losses.
Facing a numerically superior Franco-Spanish line, Nelson wanted to break it into a chaotic melee which would force the enemy to fight his well-trained crews ship to ship. Nelson's solution was to cut the opposing line in three. Approaching in two columns sailing perpendicular to the enemy's line, one towards the center of the opposing line and one towards the trailing end, his ships would surround the middle third, and force them to fight to the end. Nelson hoped specifically to cut the line just in front of the French flagship, Bucentaure. The isolated ships in front of the break would not be able to see the flagship signals, which he hoped would take them out of combat while they reformed. This echoed the tactics used by Admiral Duncan at the Battle of Camperdown and Admiral Jervis at the Battle of Cape St. Vincent, both in 1797. The Battle of Trafalgar painted by Samuel Drummond in 1825. The plan had three principal advantages. First, the British fleet would close with the Franco-Spanish as quickly as possible, preventing their escape. Second, it would quickly bring on a melee and frantic battle by breaking the Franco-Spanish line and inducing a series of individual ship-to-ship actions, in which the British knew they were likely to prevail. Nelson knew that the superior seamanship, faster gunnery and better morale of his crews were great advantages. Third, it would bring a decisive concentration on the rear of the Franco-Spanish fleet. The ships in the van of the enemy fleet would have to turn back to support the rear, which would take a long time. Additionally, once the Franco-Spanish line had been broken, their ships would be relatively defenseless against powerful broadsides from the British fleet, and it would take them a long time to reposition to return fire. The main drawback of attacking head-on was that as the leading British ships approached, the Franco-Spanish combined fleet would be able to direct raking broadside fire at their bows, to which they would be unable to reply. To lessen the time the fleet was exposed to this danger, Nelson had his ships make all available sail, including stunsails, yet another departure from the norm. He was also well aware that French and Spanish gunners were ill-trained and would have difficulty firing accurately from a moving gun platform. The combined fleet was sailing across a heavy swell, causing the ships to roll heavily and exacerbate the problem. Nelson's plan was a carefully calculated gamble. During the blockade off the coast of Spain in October, Nelson instructed his captains, over 2 dinners aboard Victory, on his plan for the approaching battle. In an animated conversation with his favorite captain, Richard Goodwin Keats, who was expected to be his second in the forthcoming battle,